Is this any better? I am not getting the feedback. I'm hoping that everyone else is in the same position. Okay. I see the comments coming in. Oh, good. Good, good, good. Okay. Well, let's try this again. I think I was halfway through my first slide. So let me regroup here. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to join you all for this conference and be able to speak on behalf of the U.S. Marshal Service role in finding missing children. My name is Darby Kirby. I am the Chief Inspector for the U.S. Marshal Service Missing Child Unit. I have been with the Marshal Service going on actually just past 10 years now, and I currently sit in Arlington, Virginia at our U.S. Marshal Service headquarters. Before arriving at our headquarters, I was an instructor at the Marshal Service Basic Academy at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Brunswick, Georgia. While at the training division, I was able to assist with numerous basic student programs as well as the agency's professional development program. And before the training division, I was way down south in the Caribbean. And I started my career with the District of the Virgin Islands, where I was a basic deputy. And I know some of you may be thinking that was a permanent work vacation. There, it actually had quite a few challenges. Living there was wonderful. Working there, maybe not so much, but I had a lot of great opportunities down there. I was very privileged to say I had that opportunity, but I'm very glad I'm doing what I'm doing now. Moving into the presentation, I am going to go over the background and just a basic overview of the Marshal Service Missing Child Program. Tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, and what we can't do. And then I'll tell you about our partnership with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and some of the resources that they have available for missing child cases. As we move through this virtual platform, please bear with me. It's actually my first virtual presentation that I have given since COVID. Think about any questions that you might have, and I will be more than happy to address them at the end of the presentation. Or at the end of the presentation, I will have my contact information available. So please take that down, and then you all can reach out to me whenever you like, whenever it's convenient. I know everybody's very busy with the conference, so if now is not a good time, please take my contact information and do not hesitate to reach out to me. So before we get started, just wanted to do a quick introduction to those of you who might not be so familiar with the U.S. Marshal Service. We fall under the Department of Justice. We were established in 1789 during the presidency of George Washington, which makes us the oldest federal law enforcement agency. But we are a small agency. We actually have less than 4,000 deputy U.S. Marshals, and our deputy U.S. Marshals are our operational support. So, we basically fluctuate anywhere from 3,500 to 4,000. So that's not a lot. We are a much smaller agency compared to some of our other DOJ partners. Our agency is divided into 94 judicial districts. Each district is represented by an appointed United States Marshal, and that includes the U.S. territories and the District Court of Columbia. And you can kind of see on this map, it's a little scrunched, but you can kind of see how these districts are broken down. Our responsibilities include, we have numerous responsibilities, But they include the protection of the judicial process. So we're essentially the enforcement arm for the United States federal courts. We protect judges, witnesses, and jurors in federal proceedings. And then we also ensure the appearance of criminal defendants for those judicial proceedings. We're responsible for the appearance of criminal defendants for each of these proceedings. So we do a lot of what we call hooking and hauling. I've done lots of that in my 10 years. We also provide security for federal court facilities in each of these 94 judicial districts that you see, as well as 12 circuits for the United States Court of Appeals. Now, most of you are probably, when you think of U.S. Marshal Service, you probably associate us with more of our fugitive mission. And fugitive apprehension is indeed a primary mission of ours, and it provides us the ability to help improve public safety. And we do that by reducing the number of violent offenders that are in our communities. Under this fugitive mission, our agency established the Investigative Operations Division. And the Investigative Operations Division is the branch that oversees the sex offender investigative mission. And that is actually where our missing child unit falls into play. The U.S. Marshals Sex Offender Investigative Branch was created following the passage of the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act. And sometimes we refer to that as the AWA. And that was passed in July of 2006. The Adam Walsh, or we also call it the Walsh Act, mandates the Marshal Service to perform these three primary missions that you see here. You might take a look at these three missions and ask yourself, where do missing children fall into these categories? Well, Adam Walsh was a 6-year-old boy who was abducted from a department store at a mall in Hollywood, Florida. And this took place in July of 1981. His severed head was found nearly 2 weeks later in a drainage canal alongside Florida's Turnpike. So because of Adam's death, it drew national media attention. And due to this entire situation, his father, John Walsh, who you may associate with TV shows such as America's Most Wanted and In Pursuit with John Walsh, became one of the biggest advocates for victims of violent crimes, and in particular, children that have been victims to violent crimes. And it was his efforts that eventually helped Congress mandate our agency to effect these three primary missions that you see here. Following the passage of the Adam Walsh Act, our agency had the ability to assist law enforcement partners with investigating crimes associated with the missing child nexus. But the missing child case had to be associated with a fugitive and or a convicted sex offender. Those were our two parameters. So initially, we were very limited in our scope of authority as to what we could do for our law enforcement partners with any missing child case outside of these two parameters. So luckily for us, in 2015, the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act, or what we refer to it as the JVTA, was passed. And the JVTA gave the agency what we call enhanced authority to help law enforcement partners with requests for assistance with any missing child case, regardless of whether or not there was a fugitive or a sex offender nexus. Now, we do have a criteria that we follow, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But the passage of this JVTA is really the meat and potatoes of where we are with this program today. It allows us to aid in the location and recovery of a child when we're asked by law enforcement, and the Marshal Service has resources available to assist. Highlighted in red you'll see the words discretionary authority. And that is because the agency was not, following the passage of the JVTA, our agency was not mandated or provided any additional resources. It was just considered this enhanced authority. Prior to the passage of the JVTA, we could not, we were very limited in our scope of assisting with missing child cases. So the JVTA, it simply allows us to respond to requests for help with finding missing children when there is no nexus to a fugitive or a sex offender. And we're able to apply our existing investigative skill set, which, over the years, we've grown to be pretty good at. And we're able to aid other law enforcement agencies in locating and recovering missing children. So in order to fully effect this new enhanced authority, in 2016, the Marshal Service established the Missing Child Unit under our Sex Offender Investigative Branch to help oversee and manage this program. So our Missing Child Unit's responsibility is to essentially oversee a nationwide program. However, I must throw this out there, we are a very, very small unit, and we only consist of, this is probably going to blow you away, but we only consist of a total of 4 full-time people that are dedicated to the unit, that are dedicated to overseeing this entire, nationwide program. And we provide the overall program management and oversight to all of our investigators in the field. So that, roughly give or take 3,500 to 4,000 deputy U.S. Marshals, we are responsible for, disseminating this information and making sure that they are working within the parameters of the JVTA. We are responsible for establishing policy, standard operating procedures, and we work with our Office of General Counsel for all legal matters in order to keep our criminal investigators safe and, again, within the scope of working under the JVTA. We also provide an annual missing child basic training. Again, some rather disappointing and sad news. We only have roughly 150 trained missing child investigators. And again, if you look at the big picture, that is not a lot. But unfortunately, over the course of the past couple of years, since the unit has been developed, we have had training scheduled, but because of government shutdowns, weather, and a pandemic, we've had to cancel quite a few of them. So we had a couple slated for this past summer, but again, with COVID, we had to cancel. So we're now looking into the next year. We are, however, right now, due to some of the higher demand for initiating missing child operations in districts, we are, sending the MCU, our small little team. We're sending everybody out to the to different districts to provide a good, foundational setting so that they're aware of all of our parameters and, again, what they can and can't do when it comes to these missing child cases, because they are different. It is a newer mission. And there's a lot of different things that that we need to address that are not the same as our fugitive mission. We also partner with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We provide them a Marshal Service liaison, and that liaison is there to overall enhance information sharing between NCMEC, the Marshal Service, as well as other federal agencies that sit with the NCMEC. So the Marshal Service has experienced some great success in recovering missing children, and since 2015, 75% of the cases that our agency offers assistance with actually results in the recovery of a child. So that is a pretty high percentage that we're very, very proud of. And 71% of those children recovered were found within 7 days of the Marshal Service providing assistance. So again, it's a pretty quick turnaround when we're asked to assist. We've got a good system down, and we're able to find these kids pretty quickly. We've had a lot of media attention due to the success of some of our short-term missing child operations. And we have been very, very diligent and working closely with law enforcement, family services, and our NCMEC partners to recover these children and get them back in the hands of their rightful custodian. I like to show our metrics for a couple of reasons. Again, first and foremost, we are good at finding people. And it's not just the bad guys. We can recover children just as well as we can find fugitives. And oftentimes, and I've even had the opportunity to experience this in the field myself, missing child investigations are more complicated than working a fugitive warrant. So again, our numbers are pretty strong, in the grand scheme of things. And the second reason I like to show them, and especially our recoveries in fiscal year 20, even amidst a global pandemic, we are still out there recovering children. And remember, I did mention earlier that the agency is not mandated to do this mission. Our folks do this because they care about the mission, and they are dedicated to helping our law enforcement partners find these children. So we talked about this JVTA authority that we were given, and we talked about some of the things that it did for us. I think it's equally important to talk about some of the things that we are not able to do and some of the things that it did not grant us. Again, keep in mind this is a discretionary mission, and we were not provided any additional resources such as operational support and funding. And there are factors as to why we might not be able to assist when our law enforcement partners ask us. And those could include the lack of operational support in smaller district offices. I mentioned that we're mandated to perform certain functions. So, for example, if there is a heavy court production day, our folks are going to have to prioritize that mission first. And we weren't afforded full-time support to the program aside from the four of us in the MCU. But I can honestly say, even given that it is very rare for our folks to turn down a request for assistance with a missing child. I have seen it happen, but it's very rare. The other thing is we are not able to determine the custody of a recovered child. That is clearly up to the courts to decide, and for family services, child protective services to handle any type of custody issues. We also don't execute state court orders or local pickup orders, but we do ask for, if there's copies, obviously we're going to ask for those because that's going to help facilitate the recovery process. And it comes in handy, especially when a child has traveled outside of the originating agency's jurisdiction, and they ask us to help find that child due to the likelihood that that child has most likely crossed state lines. But, the big takeaway here is that when it comes to the custody of a child, we are absolutely not involved with that. We rely on the courts making that decision, and then our partners with family services helping to affect that recovery. We were not offered any new investigative authority, which is something that at first when I came on with this mission, I asked myself, well, why not? But I definitely understand now. We don't have the resources available to be able to fully investigate crimes that some of our other, state, local, and federal partners are able to do. We are not, when it comes to a missing child case, we are not adopting a case as we would in a typical state, local fugitive mission. we don't take a lead role, despite some of maybe some of the media aspects that you've maybe heard recently. We are clearly in a supporting role. We don't go out, we don't collect evidence, we don't interview suspects for potential investigation into crimes like human trafficking, child exploitation, drug possession. Those are all outside of our wheelhouse. And we also can't get involved with sting type operations. There has to be a missing child involved in order for us to lend assistance. I know some of the media portrayed us being involved in a 2-week sting operation during Operation Not Forgotten in Atlanta and Macon, Georgia, and that we had to quickly set the record straight there. Again, we don't involve ourselves in a sting operation. I am strictly, our role is strictly to lend assistance. We also don't sign a formal agreement with other agencies. Some of those agencies, like the Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force or Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force or the FBI's CAR teams, we can't commit and dedicate full-time personnel to those task force. We just don't have the resources or the time to commit to those on a formal basis. But we can work with them, and we do work with them, and we work with them very well, and we've developed a lot of good working relationships. But we just have to be sure that they know that we have a specific role in the mission, and that is, once again, to find the child. Another primary reason we don't bind ourselves to these types of task force is because, again, their main goal is investigating crimes that are outside of our scope. So it's really good. We've got our swim lane, they've got their swim lane, and it's a beautiful sight when everybody comes together for the end result, which is successfully recovering a child. So this slide projects unfortunately, only a small fraction of what I'm sure you all are familiar with being a huge problem. 421,000 juveniles under 18 years of age were entered as missing in the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC, and that was in 2019 alone. This number represents reports of missing children. That means if a child runs away multiple times in a year, each incident would actually be entered in NCIC separately and counted towards this yearly total. But I can tell you, when we pulled the data, during any given month, there could easily be anywhere from 30 to 40,000 missing children under 18 years old. That's a lot of missing kids. And do keep in mind, these are just the children that are getting reported, which hardly scratches the surface. Very few of these even get reported to NCMEC, which is the National Clearinghouse for Missing Children. You can see here highlighted in red that 91% of these kids are endangered runaways. And it's been reported that if a child runs away more than 3 times, there is an 80% chance that that child is being trafficked. 1 in 6 endangered runaways are most likely a victim of child sex trafficking. And those are very, very high numbers. Runaways are typically, they typically fall in the age range of, say, 13 to 17, but we have definitely seen younger, again, unfortunately. And they're not just females. There are a lot of young males that are being trafficked as well. We recently conducted an operation in Ohio called Operation Autumn Hope, and that involved the Southern District of Ohio and the Ohio AG's office and our Southern District of West Virginia. And I helped them when they tallied their final stats, and it was actually determined that there were more males recovered than females. Now, having said that, I'm not going to say that these males were indeed being trafficked, because we don't know. But it was very interesting for me to see that more males were recovered than females, because I think it's like a stereotype. Most people think that it's just females are being trafficked, but that is indeed not the case. Family abductions, they actually, and this is a shocking figure to me, but they only account for about 4%. And those are typically your parental or custodial abductions. And we offer assistance with these cases, of course, due to the fugitive nexus. We were offering assistance before the JBTA, and we continue to offer assistance with these types of parental custodial abductions. There's a few caveats. I'll get into that in a moment, but they're definitely again our bread and butter as well. Lost, injured, or otherwise missing children. This is when a child disappears under unknown circumstances. It's usually under 12 years old, but they're typically too young to be considered a runaway. An example of this is like a child wanders and becomes lost, and they may have been abducted, but there's really no evidence that alludes to that. We've offered assistance in recovering autistic children who have wandered off. One fact about autistic children is that they are very attracted to lights and water, and so this would put them in the classification of being lost, injured, or otherwise missing. And again, you can see here the percentage. These are actually a pretty low percentage. And even lower are the non-family or the stranger abductions. This is actually the rarest type, but yet I think that this is the type that the general public thinks is happening the most. This is someone who's known but maybe not related to the child. This could occur when maybe a child's going to or from school, and the abductor is someone that's, again, not directly related to the child versus like a family abduction. So our agency can help with any and all of these missing child case examples, but we are best suited to assist with the endangered runaways and the family abductions. The FBI is actually required to respond to missing child cases involving a child that is 12 years of age and younger. So we feel they are definitely indeed the best equipped at responding to these types of situations. They have numerous immediate resources, such as their CARD teams and their JCARD teams and agents that are specialized in this type of response for help. Again, we've definitely offered assistance, and we've recovered children in these last two categories, but we typically would, our first recommendation was talk to the FBI. So, again, some more sad facts for you. The average starting age of a child sex trafficking victim is actually 11 years old. The average age of a child sex trafficking victim is 15, and I would definitely say by a lot of our numbers and our recoveries, what we do determine either at the recovery or post-recovery, that 15 is definitely that average age. We see that quite frequently. And, traffickers tend to prey on people who are economically or socially vulnerable, such as youth who are living in poverty or on the streets, or maybe they've experienced some type of physical or sexual abuse. Oftentimes, they're going to pose as a friend. They're going to offer them food, gifts, something that appeals or entices a vulnerable child. And some cases, they actually use another child to recruit additional victims. That's actually pretty common. And recruitment can happen in public places, can happen at malls, sporting events, definitely can happen on social media, happens quite frequently. Or a lot of times it's just simply false promises that might appeal to some of these kids. And even though runaway and homeless youth are particularly vulnerable, there are victims who are groomed and recruited while just living at home and even attending school. So again, it happens right before our eyes. And who are the perpetrators in this billion-dollar industry? Well, they're pimps, And pimps might use drugs and alcohol to persuade, control, and numb these kids. They also use violence and they threaten the safety of the child's family in order to gain their sole purpose is to gain that control and that submission. And they go by the names of boyfriend, daddy, Romeo, gorilla. And most often they're associated, there's some type of gang association. And what we've seen is that a lot of these children get lured into this environment at a very early age. Once they're in it, it's very, very hard for them to get out of it. And I can speak to a recovery that we made in Atlanta during Operation Not Forgotten in August, and it was a 15-year-old girl, and she had been with one of the, and I'm drawing a blank on exactly which gang it was, but she had the tattoos, and she was so embedded in this criminal organization that she didn't know, like she didn't even, I mean, and you look at this child and you think to yourself, this is a child. This is a 15-year-old. I think about like me when I was 15, and it's so hard to see, and it's so hard to fathom the life that they have lived. I think most disturbing, and this is another thing we do see, and it's hard. It's hard to see this. Family members and foster parents, one of the absolute most disturbing perpetrators of crimes against children. When a child is raised in an environment that is supposed to be loving, caring, safe, protecting, they don't know what is good from bad, and they don't know what is right from wrong. So it's so disturbing to me to think that a parent would knowingly do this to their child. But it happens, and we actually see it quite frequently. And the reality is, sad but true, is a trafficker can really look like anyone. There is no one mold. There is no one stereotype. And it's the hard truth behind this criminal enterprise. So these are some examples of indicators that a child may be trafficked. And we've seen some of these during our missing child recoveries. We actually have our Marshal Service Behavioral Analysis Unit works with the Texas Department of Public Safety to conduct a 2-day training, and it's called the Interdiction for the Protection of Children. And if anybody here is excuse me, familiar with it, we call it IPC training. It is I think you would agree by saying it is an incredible training. During the training, they teach patrol officers, detectives, and investigators how to look for and determine signs and indicators that a child is likely being trafficked. Now, again, keep in mind that we don't investigate these crimes, but it's very important for the foundation of our program that our field investigators know what these signs look like, because that way they can go back and they can refer the information to the appropriate investigative agency. And we're actually going to be incorporating this IPC training into our missing child basic training program. And again, it's just to help our folks get that foundational knowledge so that they know what to be on the lookout for. Yes, I have a slide with a zebra and a horse. We actually used this slide during our basic training. And, the first time I saw it, I'm like, what? How does this correlate? It actually correlates very well. And I find myself, daily thinking about how our mission is a zebra and how our fugitive mission is a horse. And they're similar. Both are similar in a lot of ways, much like horses and much like zebras. But there is a 5 to 10% difference between the two, and that is absolutely critical. Missing child cases, again, we are strictly in a supporting or assisting role. We don't adopt these like we would our fugitive mission. And, excuse me, and in missing child cases, special attention has to be given to coordinating with the case detective, with NCMEC, the state missing child clearinghouse, social services, other federal, state, local law enforcement partners. There's so many people that come into play during these missing child cases. And if it's not done the right way and it's not done successfully, that's a detriment to the child. So that's exactly what we want to avoid. A missing child case is more like a hostage rescue versus a fugitive warrant, where we're going and we're slapping handcuffs on the bad guys. There's a much higher level of sensitivity that's applied to the recovery process in order to reduce the trauma that child may experience. Obviously, these children are already experiencing enough trauma, so our goal is to minimize that upon recovery as much as possible. Marshal Service has two types of missing child cases that we support. One is our fugitive missing child, and this is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a missing child case that's associated with a fugitive, or there's some type of sex offender or a nexus to our roles and responsibilities under the Adam Walsh Act. Typically, these are the parental or the family custodial. One thing to keep in mind for those of you that are law enforcement, parental or family custodial abduction cases, if we're going to provide assistance, those cases require a full extradition felony warrant for assistance. So, and you might ask, well, why? If we know where the child is and they're local, it's just because if we're going to, when we dedicate resources to it, we want to make sure that, if that child does indeed travel, cross state lines, that we're able to send what we call a collateral lead and be able to stay on the case and be able to safely recover that child in another state and have that child be brought home. So that's why we do require that full extradition felony warrant. So critically missing child cases, and this is where we shifted post the JVTA in 2015. Again, there's no associated fugitive or convicted sex offender nexus at the time we initiate support, but it does need to involve the case needs to involve either there's some suspected crime of violence, or there's risk factors that have been identified that indicate some type of elevated risk to the missing child. So yes, we can assist with any missing child case, but under the JVTA, this is the scope, this is the body of it, this is the parameters, the criteria that we work under. And on the next couple slides, I'll give you some examples of what that looks like. So what do we mean when we say a critically missing child case involves a suspected crime of violence or elevated risk to the child? These are just some examples of many of the different factors that could contribute to the endangerment of a child, and these are the ones that fall under our scope of the JVTA. Now, you can look at this list, and you can look at this next list. Honestly, there needs to be one and only one of these risk factors that would apply to the child, and we're able to assist. Where do our requests come from? It might sound pretty simple, but we actually have a couple methods where we are able to receive missing child case questions for assistance. We have the first would be our what we call our Operation Pickup, and that is when law enforcement asks the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for Marshal Service assistance. And that typically happens when they call in the intake with NCMEC and they tell NCMEC, hey, could you check to see if the Marshal Service could help us with this case? In the past, prior to just recently, in the past, we were only accepting operation pickup cases if there was a fugitive or sex offender nexus. Now we've broadened that, and we're also accepting requests for critically missing child cases too. So what happens here is that NCMEC gets the information, and they provide that information to our NCMEC liaison, and that liaison will then disseminate it to the field. We also, and I'd say most of the time, the majority of our requests for assistance comes directly from the field. So it's going directly to a district office, a regional fugitive task force, or our sex offender investigative branch. And why is that? Well, it's because we've already got these established relationships, with our state and local partners. We're already working directly with them. So that's why most of the time they just, they kind of skip the NCMEC process and they go right to the offices. So we have to have all of these things in place before we're able to offer assistance for a missing child case. And just a side note, we can also help assist in locating a person with information about a case. We call that a POI per ORI. And a good example would be there might have been a child who maybe went missing, and it's known either through law enforcement or a family member that they are in constant contact with the person outside of the originating agency's jurisdiction. Well, we can offer assistance in that case by just simply locating that person and conducting an interview, or again, whatever the ask might be. So that's also another way that we can contribute. So it's simply put, it's our assistance with missing child cases is not confined to solely locating the child. We're also able to help it in this matter as well, as long as, again, that the critically missing criteria is applied. So Marshal Service support for a missing child case has to be based on a request received from law enforcement. Now, when we say that, that doesn't mean that we can't offer our help to law enforcement. And we do that as well. But it's got to come from law enforcement. It can't come from mom. It can't come from grandma. It's got to come from a law enforcement agency. The child has to be entered into the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC, by the originating agency. Obviously, we're not making that entry. It's them making that entry. That child is in NCIC as missing and was under 18 years of age at the time of entry. Now, let me say we have circumstances when we find children that have already turned 18 years of age. We had a good handful of those during Atlanta's Operation Not Forgotten. And a lot of that was due to COVID. We had planned that operation earlier on in the beginning of the year, and due to COVID, unfortunately, we had to put on the brakes. So some of the children on that list that we originally said we were going to offer assistance with, they had what we call aged out. So what we do, we perform a locate, and it's a welfare check to ensure that child is okay and obviously not dead in a ditch somewhere. This way, the originating agency can clear the missing child entry from NCIC. We offer our assistance with we got to be careful with this though, because if we offer our assistance with the missing child case and in that time frame the child ages out, we can still involve our support, but we don't call that a physical child recovery due to the age. So when the child ages out, they're 18 years old, we can't say, hey, we physically recovered this child. So that's what we call them a child locate. we encourage the ORI to call the missing child intake into the NCMEC. We don't require this. We can't require it. I kind of wish we could require it. But due to our strong partnership, we highly encourage it with all of our missing child cases. And, again, we can be reached through a district office or through, a NCMEC child intake. So when that request is made for assistance, this is what we do. This is what we're going to take, and this is the process that we go through. We're going to first confirm that child is in NCIC is missing and was under 18 at the time of entry. If we don't have that, we cannot touch it. Can't touch it. I know it sounds like a no-brainer. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes with our investigators it might slip. So that is definitely step number one. They have to be missing in NCIC. And then we're going to make sure that case fits our Marshal Service authority, either the fugitive missing child or the critical missing child. We're just going to make sure that it meets those parameters. And then we're also going to make sure that deconfliction is performed. We're going to deconflict with the local agency. We can deconflict with NCMEC, with the other federal agencies. We just want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. And we definitely don't want to be stepping on other people's toes. So again, that's another example of how coordination is super critical with these cases. With the NCMEC intake, it's actually a very simple, quick process, probably less than 5 minutes. And I'll tell you, it opens the door to so many resources that are offered by NCMEC. Last but not least, we've got to make sure that we have the necessary resources, the support, and the time to work the case. Unlike the fugitive mission, where if we get a warrant and we often do our monthly due diligence, we can't let a missing child case sit on a desk. That child's life is in our hands, and this is something we preach every day to our investigators. If you're going to commit to this, you have to commit and you have to move quickly. So if a district is, say, short on manpower, whatever the mission essential reason is, it might not be the appropriate time to offer help. And then that might be an example of when we would, turn down assistance in a case. We partner, again, I've mentioned this numerous times because they're like our best friends. We partner with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they have amazing resources to offer, and not only to law enforcement, but the general public as well. They're a private, nonprofit agency, and they're located in Alexandria, Virginia, but they do have satellite locations in numerous different states. They are the nation's clearinghouse and comprehensive reporting center for all issues related to missing child concerns. Some examples of some of their resources include they have 24/7 on-call a case analysis unit. And through their case analysis unit, you have access to lots of open source databases. And, for law enforcement agencies, we typically have to pay for these in order to establish accounts, but because they're nonprofit, they have access to numerous public records and resources, through the private funding and donations. And just to add to that, they have provided a lot of analytical assistance for our investigators on numerous missing child cases. We work with them every time we have a Marshal Service missing child operation, and we always encourage that the originating agency call those intakes into NCMEC. They also have, and you've probably seen these, just in general in the media. They have a fantastic forensics unit, and they can do age progressed photos. And it's not just for missing children. I've actually reached out to them for some of our fugitive cases as well, some of our cold cases. And as long as there's a nexus to a crime against a child, they can help. They can do an age progressed photo. I think there's only a couple of them, so it might take them a little while, but they do phenomenal work. And I've seen, upon recovery, I have seen where, some of the children who've been gone 5+ years, they had an age progressed photo, and it looks spot on. So they're very, very talented. They also disseminate the missing child posters. We always encourage a missing child poster. We don't do missing child posters. It'd have to be clearly an exigent situation for our agency to do it. Again, we're the supporters. But they're like the go-to. They're the ones who can get that media ready and get it disseminated, and they can get it disseminated to so many different locations just throughout the U.S. and internationally. It's super impressive. They have a very, very strong media outreach, and they can be found on numerous social media sites. They also have, and this might be interesting to some of you on here, they have what's called Team Adam. And Team Adam is a team of consultants. They're on call to deploy to sites for critical child abductions or missing child incidents. They're former law enforcement professionals, and they've worked cases in their career that involve an abducted or missing child. They're not law enforcement, so again, they're there to lend a supporting role per the lead investigative agency, but that's no cost. It's at no cost to the lead investigative agency. So, if that's something that you'd like to hear a little bit more about, please do reach out to me, and I'll definitely put you in contact with the POC for Team Adam. We also have, under our sex offender investigative branch, we're actually very fortunate to have one of NCMEC's most recent created units, the sex offender tracking team. We're co-located together, and they support they support all sex offender registries and law enforcement agencies for help with non-compliant sex offenders. So again, that's if that's something that the light bulb might have gone off, please do reach out to me, and I will immediately put you in contact with our SOC team. Here's some of the contacts. Again, I don't expect you all to write all these down right now. If there's any interest, though, please do, again, reach out to me, and I'll be happy to get you this information. The big takeaway here is 1-800-THE-LOST, and that's who you call for any missing child intake. This is actually a photo from one of our deputies recovering a child in Atlanta. I want to highlight here, when it comes to the child recovery process, it's not always a glorified moment. It's probably more often than not. You have to keep in mind, the child is a victim. They might not want to be recovered. They might be outwardly hostile to police, and they oftentimes they are. They'll hide. They'll fight. They'll run. It's again, it goes back to like some of the differences. These kids don't know better. They don't know. They think law enforcement, and they just think they're out to get them. So it's definitely a mind shift for us, and it's super important for our folks to approach it with that, more of that protector mentality. Some of these kids might need a medical exam or a forensic interview, so it's just critical for us to coordinate with our partners to have those resources readily available. And that's where our partnerships with Child Family Services and Child Protective Services, Social Services, that's why those partnerships and those working relationships are absolutely critical for us. And, we stress it every single day with our folks that those folks are your best friend. So, and again, it's one of the reasons why I show the zebra and the horse slide. There's just a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of pre-planning and coordinating. So it's very important. And we do this to reduce as much additional trauma to that child as possible. Unlike our fugitive mission, again, we've just got to make sure that we're switching that mindset, and we're guardians, and we're here to protect these children. In conclusion, just a couple of things for you. This program, again, I mentioned it earlier, but it's a fairly new endeavor for us, and we are learning new things, and we're growing each and every day. Due to the recent media attention, our missing child unit is it's very, very busy. There's not a dull day. But I am so, so very grateful to be a part of just such an amazing effort. And, our Marshal Service Director, Director Donald Washington, he is 100% behind this mission. And we're so grateful for his support. He put it really well in a recent press conference. These are our children. They're not his children. They're not your children, but they're our nation's children. And that's why, I feel like this, I like to wrap it up with this quote. It's a very special quote from Nelson Mandela. And I'd like to leave you with that because I think it definitely resonates, where we're trying to indeed go with this mission. So this is our contact information. Please do write this down. Make sure you have it. Laura Joyner is actually our NCMEC liaison. So if you have any questions that you'd like to relay through NCMEC, please you're welcome to reach out to her, and she can get you in touch with the right person at NCMEC. They are a very large organization, and we're still working through the contacts ourselves, but she can definitely help you. She can help you navigate through that. And that is it for me. I hope that I think technology made it through this presentation. I hope so, and I really do appreciate you all bearing with me on that one. So I'll open it up to any questions, and if again, please do keep in mind, take my information, and I'm happy to call, email, text, whatever works best for you.